Gentlemen, if your audio is right, let's bring you both into the conversation right away. I don't know how much of the comments made by Professors Mike Obadan and Uche Waleke that Dr. Gwadabe was able to pick up before we introduced him just right now. But let's bring in first Shuaibu Idris so that if Gwadabe gets pinned to the wall, he will know how to respond. Shuaibu Idris, look, it just helps us understand what's happening. We talked about speculative attacks on the Naira, as it were. Some of us have also raised the concerns about round tripping. And then Professor Waleke says, look at what we are spending on education, look at what we are spending on health. How many Nigerians are spending money on foreign education? How many Nigerians are spending money on health tourism? And by the way, some of these financial outlays not sourced through the central bank, which is the IRA window. Now the IRA window is about 400 something to the dollar, and right now the parallel market rate, we're looking at 700 something. From your experience, just what's going on?
Thank you once again, Kingsley, for having me. First and foremost, I think we need to have some foundation even before we start. Gentlemen in the panel, is it even fair to even continue these discussions? We have had series of this type of conversations discussing what we need to do in order to save our currency. Are those in authority listening? Kingsley and Kirian and other discussants, particularly our elder Professor Mike Obadan, will bear me witness that in this forum we have had this type of conversation, and indeed the little knowledge we have, we shared. Are those in authority listening? Or were we just talking to the deep and dumb? Number two, following closely to that, is Nigerians in general are an extremely difficult lot of people. Almost everything is thrown to the government. Everyone says government is doing this, government is doing that. No one looks at what am I supposed to do. Today, we have the National Assembly calling the governor of Central Bank to come and address them about this policy. If I were Godwin Emefiele, when I go there, I will ask them, how many of you is using from their household to their body, to their cars, to their offices, how many are using any made in Nigeria item? Everybody is calling for the head of Goodluck Jonah, what is his name, Godwin Emefiele. He has failed. But is he the problem? Now with that foundation, let me take a dive into the issues. I am glad to have not, what Professor Mike Obadan and Professor Uche has said in terms of legacy issue history. First and foremost, we have had a terrible industrial policy from 1970 till date. Import substitution, and we skewed our economy in such a way, a manner that close to about 95% of raw materials that our factories need are supposed to be imported. How do you have an import-dependent economy not going to have challenges of foreign exchange? We are not exporting processed goods. Even the crude oil we have been blessed by God, we export it and import petroleum products. How else do you want to see any other paradox other than this kind of situation that Nigeria has found itself? And it's holistically, and all of us are guilty of this offense. Is it government? Is it we Nigerians? Is it those in authority? I mean, civil servant? Everyone has a share of the blame, and we then point one finger, meanwhile the rest of the fingers are pointing at us. You look at the challenge of exchange rate. Basically, I will say there are two factors, external and internal. Professor Mike Obaden has dimensioned some of them. Externally, Nigeria is not an island, it's playing in the international economic arena. Therefore, what happens in United Kingdom, what happens in US, what happens in Latin America or Asia, directly or indirectly affects Nigeria. Internally, we have had series of actions by government and by central banks that have contributed enormously to this depreciation. Is it the issue of speculation? Is it the issue of currency predators? I don't think we should narrow it to Nigerians wanting to buy dollars. Why are Nigerians running to safety to buy dollars? Number one, markets are driven by sentiment. Markets are driven by emotions. Mostly, fundamentals in market seldom play a role in pricing. Emotions and thought process of traders direct the activities of players. Now, when you take an action that makes market players to have a trust deficit in you and in your system, then what have you been able to achieve? You have exacerbated the issues. We have challenges in producing crude oil. This is a country that was producing 2.2 million barrels per day. We went down to 950 barrels per day. Now, our major source of foreign exchange, we couldn't even sustain investment in the production of crude oil. I mean, how else do we want to run a system? Now, the non-oil export, the last time I checked, last year's revenue or dollars we were able to generate has dwindled to close to about 40%, largely because of insecurity. Bandits are challenging people from mining. Bandits are challenging people from producing cocoa or maize or sorghum or soya beans that we will be able to export, or ginger that we are exporting. And we are not able to address or give these farmers the necessary security and protection to be able to produce these goods that could be exported to earn foreign exchange. And to worsen the situation, like Professor Obaleke has said, the demand is increasing and will continue to increase. Population, we are adding an average of 5 million children per annum, and therefore...
All right, we've just lost the audio, there through to Lagos. I hope our engineers are doing something to rectify the situation. For now, we are back to the studio here in Abuja. All right, let's return to Professor Baden once more. Now that we've lost contact with our Lagos audio line. Professor Baden, you listened to the last speaker, that's Shuaibu Idris, and he made mention of poor or rather terrible industrial policy that we have in this country. Yes, you have given us an analysis of what may have caused the plummeting of the naira in terms of its value. But there are very concrete issues that he mentioned. Terrible industrial policy. This is a country where people spend dollars on daily basis, even government officials, even school fees are sometimes paid in dollars. So the nation has been dollarized. And why has it been allowed to last this long? Because of course the chase for the dollar, the demand is now higher than the supply, and is affecting our own local currency. There are certain policies, that may have been put in place that were not active. Now, in terms of the current situation that we find ourselves, some have also said that the CBN's attempt to control the value of the naira with the continuous exclusion of the BDCs will only lead to further depreciation of the naira. Do you agree to that? If not, what should be the right course?
Well, thank you very much, Kirian. Let me say that I fully subscribe to the very important points advanced by Mr. Shuaibu Idris. And the issue of industrial policy that he talked about, yes, it's a failure. It's a failure in the sense that as of today, you find that, most industrial factories are comatose. A good number of them have closed. Some have relocated to neighboring countries. And then the industrial goods that we are supposed to be producing in the country, we import all of them. We import raw materials. We import intermediate goods. All these put pressure on the stock of foreign exchange available. And so the industrial policy has not been implemented. There are series of industrial plans, master plans, and so on, but they have not been effectively implemented to stem the tide of deindustrialization in Nigeria. That is the phenomenon that has occurred as a result of the failure of industrial policy, which Mr. Shuaibu Idris, mentioned. The question you asked is whether, the issue of suspension or banning of sale of official foreign exchange, to the bureau de change, would have been a factor. And I will say no, for the simple reason that whatever foreign exchange that was allocated to bureau de change before for small foreign exchange transactions, personal travel allowance, basic travel allowance, and others, that volume of foreign exchange went directly and still go directly to the deposit money banks. In other words, the stock of foreign exchange available, for sale either to enterprises or individuals who have personal needs has not been reduced because, bureau de change, enterprises do not have access to foreign exchange. What has happened is being mentioned perhaps tangentially in the process of the discussions, is that as at this point in time, the major sources of foreign exchange to the country are not yielding, enough foreign exchange. For some of them have actually declined. The major sources of foreign exchange to the country are export of crude oil. In other words, proceeds from crude oil sales. Secondly, proceeds from non-oil export sales. Then thirdly, proceeds from capital inflows and one other source. These sources in recent times have not improved, but at the same time, you find that the demand for foreign exchange is skyrocketing. Nigerians at this point in time still want to buy all kinds of goods and services from abroad, including education services, medical tourism and all that. So you find a situation like Shuaibu Idris mentioned, that the import structure or the production structure of the country is highly import dependent, and Nigerians have excessive appetite for importation of all kinds of goods and services. Under such circumstance, when foreign exchange earnings, have reduced, you find the demand for foreign exchange skyrocketing. And a major factor in the issue of foreign exchange problem is the comatose nature of the refineries, to the extent that whatever little quantity of crude oil export that is sold abroad, as at today, maybe less than 1 million barrels per day of crude oil export out of a total production of about 1.2 million barrels against the OPEC quota of 1.72 million barrels. You find that whatever is sold by way of direct export sales, is used, as we are told by the NNPC Limited, to import, refined petroleum products. And in addition, it pays subsidies. So under the circumstance, foreign exchange accretion is virtually not there, other than from perhaps the little quantity of non-oil exports. So invariably, there is excessive demand for foreign exchange against the backdrop of very low, foreign exchange earnings and low capital inflow and heightened capital flight against the backdrop of monetary policy normalization in the advanced countries, particularly the US. So invariably, like I explained before, like Professor Waleke mentioned a number of legacy factors. There are so many of them. But the question posed to me was, what is the current situation? Why is it like that? Perhaps the president of the Association of Bureau d'Exchange may be able to provide insight as to whether my investigations, which I mentioned before, that respectable Nigerians, and economic agents are now hoarding, foreign exchange. They refuse to offload into the foreign exchange market. So as it were, even if the central bank, resumes sale of foreign exchange to the Bureau d'Exchange, the situation will not change, for the simple reason that it was the misbehavior of the BDCs that led to the suspension in the first place.
Mike Abada, thank you very much. We're indeed bringing in now Dr. Aminu Gwadabe into the conversation. You see him there in our Lagos Network Center. And earlier, let's apologize to Shuaibu Idris while he was still in flight. Excuse me, we lost the audio connection through our satellite uplink, but we understand that that's been cleared up. And so we're coming back to you, gentlemen, in our Lagos Network Center. Dr. Aminu Gwadabe, well, the Bureau d'Exchange operators have also been blamed for the current speculative attacks on the Naira. What exactly is happening? Are people just mopping up the Naira? Are your members also hoarding? Or are you going to have another set of primaries and they are preparing to mop up dollars so that they will give to delegates?
Okay. Good morning, Kingsley, Mr. Creole, and the panelists. I want to borrow your permission, Mr. Kingsley, for protection, because already I find myself in the midst of my regulators. I will not be talking as a pure economist. I'll be talking as a field man. And I thank Prof for asking me about his investigation. First, let us state the problem. I think it's only when we state the problem that we can even provide solution. I use the root causes analysis, the RAC, by defining the problem. The problem is an intensity of ostentatious psychological preference of a foreign currency over a local currency, both by individual and corporate bodies. And what is the reason? Simply put, O defined as dollarization, currency substitution. Some of the speakers have said part of this reason in terms of our sources of supply. which starts with oil exports, non-oil exports, portfolio investment, foreign direct investment. The one that I have not had so far, which is the hanging fruit, is the remittances inflow that my association is advocating. As we speak, downward spiral is a self-inflicting phenomenon. Panic buying today reduces the value of the dollar, thereby also enhancing panic buying tomorrow. Put this together, the trajectory will now be a lost confidence in the currency. And once people lose confidence in their local currency, the behavior is natural. While economics here is natural, it's about value. You will not want to stay in a position where inflation rate of about 20% is deepening into the value of your asset you want to hedge against. We see people now even dropping their cryptocurrency, going into the US bonds because of their Fed interest rate. It's just natural. It's a phenomenon that is not limited to Nigeria, it's global. Nigeria is predicated with so many multiple exchange rates. The dominant one is the fixed exchange rate of the Apex Bank. You have the power market rate. You even now have what we call the cryptocurrency rate. So, in a situation whereby you have this confusing multiplicity of exchange rate, tell me how will your currency be stable? To your next question, I think it's a misnomer. BDC are also a transmission mechanism of the central bank policy direction. Let's go back to 2006. A lot of regimes practices from 1986 till 2006. Several windows were created from import licensing, second-tier foreign exchange market, whole Dutch auction system, retail Dutch auction system, until 2006. None has been effective than the window created for the Bureau de Change to meet the gap, to close the gap between the official exchange market and the parallel exchange market. The BDCs have done that as at then, out of the wisdom of the then governor, Professor Charles Soludo, who is now the governor of the Anambra State, created that window first to formalize the activities of the Bureau de Change. Second, to give liquidity to the retail sector. The major pressure is on the retail sector. People cannot pay for school fees. People cannot travel. People cannot pay for $200 import of their spare parts, for their equipment, for their subscription, for their mortgage. When you have that pressure in that market, definitely it will be spiraling into other Ghanaian market. So it's a same phenomenon. So in that case, like I said, we look at the sources. The oil, we cannot even meet our quota, like they have all said. And what is the reason? Most of the oil companies now are even owned by Nigerians that have not even capacity. During when you have the investors there, if we are in this kind of crisis, they run back to their country and bring these dollars to invest into the economy and meet up the production. Look at the export proceed. People buy yam in Nigeria to go to Ghana and wash it and pack it and package it and call it made in Ghana. Why? Because of the low quality of our export. 3. If you look at the 81% of investors in 3 years have left the country. Let us look at the currency substitution. even though the statistics is not verified. It is being estimated that over $100 billion is even outside the control of the Apex Bank surveillance, under the people's pillows, under people's bed, evacuated abroad. So this is the tenacity of the issue. The hanging fruit is the remittances. I don't know if you follow the last conference of the NIDCOM, Nigerian Diaspora Commission. There are a lot of lamentations of billions of dollars inflow into this country that is not seen. And this is because of the imperfection. This is because of misalignment. This is because of monopoly. And what we are saying, that space should be broken. We are not after the FX window of the central bank. We know it's not the practice. But the practice in other clients, let's look at India. India faces this crisis in the 70s. They sit down, they align their foreign policy with their diasporans abroad. They call all of them to at least come in and salvage the situation. I want to say here, there is no patriotism in capitalism. While running a capitalist system, you cannot expect an individual, a rational economic individual. You have two windows where one is doing 700, one is doing 420, and you want him to come at 420. He will jump the fence. It's not possible. So we need to do something.
Dr. Aminu, indeed, we have to do something. And you started by saying that you want to state the problem. You've done that successfully. You've also brought in some hypotheses, as well as dissected the situation. But from what I can understand, it's multifaceted. It's multifaceted from, a terrible industrial policy to other aspects that he has raised. But
Kira, I'm sorry, I know you want to ask a question. So you can write on this. A number of the factors that our distinguished guests have raised, these are factors that have been with us. Whether it's poor industrialization policy, the fact import dependence, and so on and so forth, declining proceeds from oil. We're producing around about 1.2 million barrels of oil per day. How do you explain the current predative nature against the naira? That's just the point. What has happened? What has caused this? I mean, they say it's behavior, market behavior, irrational behavior. What is the trigger for this?
Yes, and that also mentioned the issue of panic buying, and loss of confidence in the nation's
what is the cause of that?
Exactly, and of course the multiplicity of exchange rate. Please contextualize this and let us round up this segment.
Yes, the problem has to do with this mismatch between demand and supply. I think that is clear, and it's more now because you're saying, what is the major problem, now? I think it's because we're in a penultimate election year. Much of the demand has come as a result of politicians, demanding dollars. We saw, just as Prof rightly mentioned, a surge in the demand for dollars in the parallel market, before the primaries, and the demand has, of course, continued, particularly given the fact that a lot of people now are taking, demanding this dollar more as a store of value. That's why you hear that people are now keeping dollars, under their pillow, because of the high rate of inflation, in Nigeria. Inflation has reduced the purchasing power of the naira, so you will now naturally find people, wanting to now store their wealth, in dollar. So we have had in recent time we have had an uptake in, dollar denominated, virtual currencies, Bitcoin. We've also had uptake in, people literally going to mop up these things because of their expectation that the naira will be devalued, the expectation that the exchange rate will further rise, which is, why, I was happy when I read that the central bank governor made it, very clear that, there is no intention to devalue the naira, because some have, suggested that the way that the naira is currently overvalued, And if the naira is currently overvalued, some have said it should be around. As a matter of fact, there are people that look at the parallel market rate and say that's a reflection of the value of the naira, because according to them, that is where you have market forces, fully at play. But I quite, disagree, because of this speculative demand that we have established. That's actually what is driving the exchange rate. I want to also say, Kingsley, that I think that what is happening now is transitory. I also think, and my optimism is based on the fact that in 2017, you recall, around February of that year, the naira rose to as high as 520 naira in the parallel market.
That's right.
Yes. By April, when the central bank introduced the I&E window of 2017, we saw a convergence of rates. The parallel market rate crashed. Okay, we saw a convergence of rates between the official and the parallel market rate to about 357. And part of why I think that this is transitory and that is, it can be contained, in the near future, is because the central bank, unlike in the past, today has relatively sufficient reserves, external reserves, for intervention.
Okay, well, Professor Ochoa, thanks a lot. Let's get the closing thoughts from Shuaibu Idris. We are pressed for time. We know that this is a subject matter we'll have to return to further interrogate, more particularly in terms of suggestions. I like the issue you raised, Uche Waleke, about what happened 5 years ago. At some point, I'm sure persons who thought it was a joke, they were circulating on the social media. They had a photograph of a 500 naira note, and then they had a photograph of a one US dollar note. I was saying that this is the current exchange rate. Now, I don't know how they're going to work that out. Now it's about 700 and something. But Shuaibu Idris, those who made Forex are unable to get it. Aviation sector, for instance. The aviation sector is in crisis. They say they're not able to get their Forex needs. Some of them are even going to the parallel market to go and source for Forex and all kinds of things that do not just seem to be in place. Some experts had also argued that there's little that the central bank through its monetary policy measures can do to have a fix. What is the way forward in bullet points?
Kingsley, straight to the point, 2-3 issues the central bank has done, which has inadvertently contributed to where we are today. Number one, the intervention by the central bank by giving out enormous amount of loans, close to about 2-3 trillion naira. Most of those loans were given to quote unquote people who do not deserve to be given those loans. These loans were used to buy ostentatious consumption items, and quite a number of these loans are already bad. Whoever buys a basket knows that that basket will throw water, and there is need for the central bank to have everything. We have Bank of Industry, we have Bank of Agriculture, we have Infrastructure Development Bank, we have this, we have that. Why is the central bank intervening directly? This is causing an expansion monetary policy, and so much money is being pumped into the system. Number two, the NFIU, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, is biting a little harder, and therefore corrupt officials who have stolen our money, they have so much naira, they don't know what to do with it, and they cannot take it into the system. What do? They demand for dollars. So, Professor Margo Baden, it is not just the hoarding, but also there is massive demand from corrupt officials who have the penchant to steal our money and then, keep them in dollars. Last but not the least is the issue of the real exchange rate misalignment. Professor Obaden, I beg you in the name of God to take a critical look, you and your committee, to take a critical look on the real exchange rate situation in Nigeria and look at the possibility of having some level of alignment. We are running a crawling peg at 420 naira. Should it be at 500 naira per dollar? If you don't align it well, why wouldn't exporters of non-oil items hold their dollars? The price is not right. Why should I sell? So I think we need to look at these things holistically so that we might be able to have some solution. I just pray that they are listening. Like I did say, it is just not so much worthwhile to come.
Shaibu Idris, thank you. Thank you so much indeed. They're listening, you know. You have made your point and are very they're very valid. And at this point, I'd like to thank you. As my colleague Kingsley said earlier on, we could have a second round of this conversation in the nearest future. But for now, let's appreciate all of you for being here this morning. Shaibu Idris, a financial expert and the MD and CEO of Timeline Consult Limited. Oh, thank you. I also like to appreciate Aminu Gwalabe, President, Association of Bureau Exchange Operators of Nigeria, APCON, both of them from the Lagos studios. And now let's also thank immensely to Professor Michael Badan, member of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee. Thank you, sir, for reaching us from Benin. And of course, our own Professor Uche Waleke, President, Association of Capital Market Academics and Professor of Capital Market at the Nasarawa State University. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. All right, so you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. I have a second leg of today's conversation, which of course is on ecological fund. Stay with us. We'll be back very shortly.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. For safety at home, still be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dsspr@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence?
And two, the objective is to create an intervention fund that will enable government to speedily address serious ecological and environmental problems nationwide.
Now, 1% of the federal allocation, or better still, the federation allocation, was set aside for the federal government to tackle ecological challenges and for proper utilization of the fund. The The Ecological Fund Office, now known as the Ecological Project Office, was set up and domiciled in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation with a mandate to ensure that 1% of the federal government share is well managed to ameliorate ecological challenges in any part of the country.
Now, the Ecological Project Office recently moved by Mr. President Office from 2015 to 2022.
And joining us now in the studios to discuss is Ecological Project Office, who, of course, serves under the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. The PAMSEC is Dr. Habiba Lawal. Dr. Lawal, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you and good morning.
Let's just begin. Cleo and I were saying a few things about how the Ecological Fund came into being and who has what share, who doesn't have what share. Give us some conceptual clarification about the funding for ecological issues. I'm asking this question against the backdrop of what we do know that some governors in the past have been prosecuted for finagling with the ecological funds due to their states. So what is the relationship with the ecological funds due to states and ecological funds due to the federal government, and what is the federal government doing with its own share?
Thank you so much. At the establishment of the fund and the Ecological Project Office in 1985, the entire derivation and ecology fund is actually 2.32% overall. That's for the Federation. And at that time in 1985, almost up to 2000 or 2002, the entire fund used to be under the management of the Ecological Fund Office. And at that time, states would write and request for funds to manage their own or ameliorate their own ecological problems within their states. So if they write, the functions of the Ecological Fund Office then, amongst other things, was to look at that request, process it, pass it through the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and then the President will assent. And if he assents, the total funds approved will then be released to this function. But in between that also, the federal government also used to do intervention. So both were running together. But sometime around when democracy was restored in 1999, one of the states, I think Lagos, now took up the matter that that money should be shared. They don't want to be coming to federal government. She should be shared like all funds as a consequence of fiscal federalism. And eventually by 2002, they took federal government to court and they won. And since that time, then the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, together like they do all other funds, they now propose the sharing formula which was endorsed. So federal government takes 1% of the 2.32% that is the amount set aside for ecology and derivation. The state governments take 0.72 and they is shared amongst the 36 states. Then the local governments, the 774 local governments also now take 0.6%. So in summary, the states and local governments take 1.32%, while federal government takes 1%. There has been changes small and those greater details, but when that executive, when that decision was taken, it was during President Obasanjo. The federal government share was 1.46. He dedicated and he gave up the 0.46 to states. That's how their value became a bit higher, and so that they can be taking care of ecological challenges within their environment, while the federal government will just play a coordinating role. And that was the sharing formula then, and since 2002, and that has been it up to today. And coming back to what the federal government does with its own 1%, the federal government's own 1% is being shared or being managed by 5 agencies. So the Ecological Project Office is only one of those 5 that benefit from that 1%. The further agencies benefiting from the funds are benefiting because the laws establishing them give them that certain percentage. The first of those agencies is the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. She takes 20% of the federal government's 1% every month. Then the second is the National Agency for the Great Green Wall. They take 5% every month. Then of recent, the two others joined. The National Northeast Development Commission takes 10% out of the federal government's 1% monthly. Then the National Agency for Land Development, National Agricultural Land Development Agency, NALDA, they take 10% every month. So you will see that out of the federal government's 1%, 45% of that 1% goes to 4 other agencies. So it is the balance of that 1%, bearing the directive of the president that there must be at least at every time T 5 billion naira left in the account of that fund for any national emergency he may need to handle. So so for that, it is within the balance that on quarterly, when the funds was much, we used to go to ask the president on quarterly basis to approve some projects, and we ensure that we get every part of the country to have a share of it. But now that the funds, more people are like NALDA was scrapped, it was only revived a year and a half ago. Northeast Development Commission was created only like 2 years ago. So before then, we had more funds. But with the coming of these two, the funds have reduced. So we go to the president on average every 6 months to ask for him to look at what we're proposing so that we can be able to ameliorate some ecological challenges.
Okay, so from what you've explained, madam, it appears that the government does not have control over what the states do with their own ecological fund in terms of whether the funds are properly utilized or not. You know, because as my colleague raised earlier on, there is this story of, as a matter of fact, almost in every state, that ecological funds are not properly utilized for which it was meant, and you know, it has become a source of corruption in so many states of the country. And one would also like to ask, you know, why is it that some states that perhaps have more peculiar, more how do I put it, like dangerous ecological situation than others? That when the states share this money equally, does it make sense that states share it equally? Yet the states are not equal in terms of natural disasters, in terms of existing like erosion. There are erosion sites in this country across the nation that can be, you know, spotlighted. So why is the ecological fund not directed to such projects rather than just sharing? Or is it because of the change in nomenclature of the establishment?
I don't think it's because of the change. If you recall, I said there was a court judgment that directs that every tier of government, the Supreme Court gave judgment that every tier of government should have their own share and manage their share. The analogy is every month, every state at FAC collects its own share of funds. And the federal government doesn't have the mandate to monitor how they spend their own. The system of government we run, we cannot demand, because the office, the law setting of the office does not include the fact that you monitor those governors that you are saying that have been prosecuted. I will just go back a little to say is that sometime in the regime of President Jonathan, even with this sharing formula going on, some governors wrote to the president and mounted pressure, and then he approved a 2 billion for each of, I think it's 15 or 16 states, and they said, their letter said they were going to do XYZ projects, and I think those were the ones that had actually been prosecuted, if I recall, because we do get letters to verify, clarify. So it happened during another administration. The president has the authority to look at the situation, the request from states, and then give them funding. So he gave some funding to some states, and then some states, I think, maybe didn't do what they had earlier promised to do, and that's why they've been prosecuted. So, but on a general note, the Ecological Fund Office does not oversight the states. We don't have the mandate to oversight the states. They're a tier of government on their own. We can only advocate and try to get them do what they do. So, but I think the the citizens of those states should demand accountability for the projects for the funds that are being utilized. Then coming to the fact that whether the funds are shared equally or not, I think you recall that these funds are shared at FAC, and funds that are shared at FAC, there are other funds that those states, they are getting derivation funds. The Niger Delta gets states some extra funding for environmental degradation. So I don't think the revenue mobilization, fiscal allocation, and fiscal commission that gave the sharing formula, it was discussed and approved. I don't think it took in the fact that this amount of funding must be looked at in terms of the ecological emergency of each state.
Gully erosion endemic areas like Anambra and the other parts of eastern part of the country.
Yes, that's the one you see. But let me be very frank. In 2017, the problem of Anambra is that the soil type itself makes it susceptible to erosion. But in addition, the land size of Anambra, when you compare with another state that has 2 times the land size, you see that by the time you weigh the different what they have. Let me go back to what I was trying to say. In 2017, the Federal Executive Council directed my office, I was still then in the ecological office, to do to document all ecological sites in Nigeria. And we did that piece of work. We have a published document on that. And what we found that is that yes, the southeast they all look more feasible because the land size is small and you can see the gullies are there. But almost every state has daunting ecological. We documented over 2,700 ecological sites in Nigeria. Yes, the volume differs. Some is depth, some is wider, some is more of pollution, some is desertification. But I want to say that every state of the federation is bedeviled by ecological challenge. And I also want to add that the total money, the 2.32 set aside, to be frank, whether the states use it as judiciously as possible and the federal use it as judiciously as possible, it will not solve the ecological challenges we have. In fact, by the time we looked at it, it was that if you put all ecological challenges static and use the current volume of funds we get, for the next 40 years, we will not finish solving the ecological challenges currently on the ground with the volume of funds that are on the ground. So I think for me is let's look how. Yes, we should judiciously manage what we have, but I think we should also look at preventive, give a lot of attention to preventive, and then think of maybe the revenue mobilization, allocation, and fiscal commission should look at maybe the derivation that and the ecology fund that is set aside.
I was wondering, I don't know, Kira, Dr. Habib Alawal is saying perhaps they have to forage for more funds for the federal government and also for the state governments. And persons are going to raise the issue, you've also touched on that briefly, that where is the economic justice in all this? We have funds set aside for ecological remediation activities, and yet the evidence from what you have said, over 2,000 ecologically impacted sites are still there staring us in the face, and it might take, in your opinion, some 4 or 5 decades to adequately address this. Do we have a sense of how judiciously these resources are being utilized, say at the state and then at the local government levels? The track saying is that a stitch in time saves 9. So if they were getting the stitches right in time, the challenges perhaps might not be as gargantuan as they are today.
Well, I agree with what you are saying, 100%. All I was trying to say is that even if all those funds are judiciously used, I'm just saying that Nigeria is still challenged with ecological challenge, will be challenged. But me and you are in tandem to the fact that no matter how little those funds are, they need to be applied to what they are applied. They need to be what they are meant for. And as it is, we as the Ecological Project Office does not have a mandate to monitor or to comment on that. So
I was also wondering, let me bring this in. Is there sufficient environmental awareness? Because that could also be a facilitator, because sometimes the things you pick up in the media and even private conversations do not appear to focus on those. We just see them, okay, there's one small gully there, until it begins to swallow houses and swallow roads. Nobody will know that there's a challenge there. It's like a pothole you have on the road. Before, if it's not a crater, then nobody walks about it. Is it possible to look at it from the other angle? Namely, for instance, maybe greater advocacy, and then tweaking the ways that we go about this. I'll give you another example in terms of tweaking the ways. The Great Green Wall, I don't know how much of progress we have made, at least on the Nigerian end of it. There were suggestions in the past that, look, youth club members, some of them who are roaming around in the streets in urban areas, why don't you deploy them as part of the National Youth Corps program for purposes of tree planting along the Great Green Wall and watering and nurturing those trees?
Okay, well, I think we start with I hope the Great Green Wall is listening. That's a suggestion for them to take on board. But my own take is that, yes, advocacy is important, which is, we will do a lot in terms of prevention. Like I said, prevention is critical. But let me just bring you back that the way the ecological project office is set up is an intervention office, just to intervene and come back. You need to know that there's a national government's national machinery that has a mandate for environmental protection. And that is the Federal Ministry of Environment. So they do policy, they do advocacy, they do prevention, and they do all the awareness. So that is the mandate of another senior sister agency,
Exactly.
but not ours. But for us, at any location we are, and we are at that location, we do advocacy, and but we try not to clash, to come out to do a function that's not ours.
That's because of time. I'm cutting you short. Just a yes or no answer. Do you oversight the 5 agencies you mentioned under the federal allocation for the ecological fund? Do you oversight such agencies?
No, except one.
Okay. All right. At this point, we would like to, call it a day.
You didn't let her name the one that you oversight.
All right, madam. Thank you indeed for coming this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. The Permanent Secretary, Ecological Project Office, in the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Dr. Habiba Lawal. She's also been Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Science and Technology, and of course other ministries. It's been very wonderful talking to you this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's take some sports news.
Folashade Rafiatu Lawal has won Nigeria's second gold medal at the 2022 Commonwealth Games. The 25-year-old won the medal in the women's 59 kg weightlifting event on Sunday. Lawal lifted a total of 206 kg to set a Commonwealth record for accumulated lifts. She also set the Commonwealth record in the snatch category after lifting 90 kg for her first lift. In the men's category, Edidi Ongumofia on Sunday clinched bronze medal for Nigeria in weightlifting at the ongoing Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games in the men's 67 kg category. Umofia lifted a combined 290 kg in the snatch and clean and jerk to get on the podium. Umofia was beaten to the gold medal by India's Jeremy Larenunga, who had a lift of 300 kg, a games record. And in table tennis, Nigeria's men's team have qualified for the semi-finals in the table tennis event of the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games. Led by Quadri Aruna, the Nigerian team edged Malaysia 3-2 in the doubles and singles to advance into the last 4. Nigeria is now guaranteed a medal for reaching the semi-finals. Nigeria will now meet India in the semi-final, which comes up on Monday. As at the time of filing this report, Australia occupy top spot on the medals table. Hosts England play catch-up in second place, while New Zealand breeze down the necks of hosts in third. Team Nigeria sit in joint 8th position with Malaysia, with 2 gold medals and a bronze.
That's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria this Monday morning. Join us again tomorrow, Tuesday, same time, 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley of Sadalo. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And I'm Kirian Umaru. Have a great day.